Hello world, this is Brian, aka Invisible Doogie, and I'm here with another tutorial for Project Spark for you guys. This is going to be a pretty long tutorial because I'm going to be talking about basically every one of the major things you need to know about paths. And so I'm going to focus on 4 different things. Each of them will take quite a bit of time, so I will put below in the description area what minute counters each of the main areas start at so that you can skip through this tutorial, or you can listen to all of them, whatever you prefer. So paths. Paths are one of the best things in Project Spark to create scripted and professionalized events. You'll see this is my still in progress game, Zombie Punch 2, which is starting to make some headway, where I use a lot of paths in it. So I've gotten pretty familiar with all the path tools. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start first with talking you through all of the different properties of paths so that you understand how to set a path and how to create it, how to set it up, all that stuff. Then we are going to focus on putting a camera on a path and the best ways to do that. Number 3 will be looking at how to put characters on a path and how to work with those. And the last thing we're going to look at is how to set a path so that once someone has gotten to the end of a path, they can do other things. So anyways, let's start with talking about paths in general. So if you go to your prop tool area, just type in path up here. And the funny thing is, for the first week or so, I didn't know paths existed and what they even did when I was playing Project Spark. So I saw all these people with all these cool camera movements, and I thought, how do they do that? It'd be cool if they had some sort of path tool, and yeah, they did. So anyways, you just place a path down, and so how a path works is it starts with this logic cube here, where you'll see this cube right here. That is the property area of the path, and then we have points here. And the points here are the actual points on the path itself, where you can move those around, and you can also add points to the path. So, for instance, I hit the plus button here, it adds a point. There's a little glitch where every time you add a new point, it adds one kind of far away from you. Watch, I've hit the plus button. It goes all the way over there, and so if you end up working with like 20 different points, then just be prepared for every time you hit the plus button for a point to appear like all the way on the other side of the map over here. It's kind of annoying. It's a bug that I'm pretty sure Team Decode is aware of and is fixing. Okay, but here's a simple path with 4 different points that we've created. And you can set the points to start and end wherever you want to. So we're already there and creating a path, and so things can start doing stuff on this path. Before we get into the things doing stuff, let's get to the path itself. So you click on that the gear button to get into all of its settings. You go to properties, path. By the way, you'll notice I clicked on the logic cube. Again, the logic cube is where all the paths items are stored. So then you have all of these different areas to choose between. So mover mode, you got 4 options. You have ping pong, loop CW, position, play once. I have tested this a lot of times. As far as I can tell, ping pong and loop CW do the exact same thing, where they make it so that once a thing, whatever object, gets to the end of a path, it goes back and just goes back and forth looping across the path. So for instance, you have a guard that you want walking back and forth along an area. You'd set up a ping pong path. I would do ping pong instead of loop CW because I haven't been able to figure out what the difference is with loop CW at. So stick with ping pong. Same with position and play once. Both of these have it so that when an object gets to the they move along a path, and when they get to the very end, they stop. And as far as I can tell, they both do the same thing. Again, I've tried them both a lot of times. I'm sure there's some differences, but stick with the play once option just because I regularly use that. So I don't know, there could be something weird with position. So starting waypoint, you can choose which point along the path you want your item to start at. So say you don't want it to start at 0, which could be useful for different ping pong paths. You can set whichever one of the points you have. So I have 0, 1, 2, and 3 because I have 4 points in mind, so I can set which one of those it's at. The speed is kind of self-explanatory. The pause at the end is if you are doing a loop or a ping pong path, then once it gets to the end of the path on either side, you can set it to pause a certain amount of seconds. Pause at points means you can set the object on the path to stop at each one of the different waypoints along there. That it can be very useful for cameras. If you want, say you want a camera to look at something for a certain amount of time, then you can set it to look there. Path type, this is just, you're going to have the option between straight and curved. The difference between the two is curved basically means if you have your path zigzagging along a bunch of different points, curved will curve the path so that you don't have as stark of a transition between moving left and right and strafing sideways. So if you have a path that has a lot of different zigzagging around the map, set it to curved. Otherwise, if your path is just straight or has very few turns and you want precise turns, keep it at straight. Orientation, this is one of the most important things to set. You have the option between fixed, 2D, and 3D. Stick with fixed if you are going to have a camera on the path. I find that cameras are that this works well with them. 2D and 3D, basically the difference between those and fixed is that when something is fixed on the path, say you have a person walking along a path, they're always going to face forward on fixed, even if they're moving left or right. If you set it to 2D or 3D, then they're actually going to turn like a person would normally turn. I set everything to 3D pretty much because 3D also accounts for if something is moving up or down, the movements along there. So just either set yours to fixed or 3D. Don't even worry about 2D. So for movements, we have linear, where the item moves along the path at the same speed all the time. We have smooth arrival, where it moves at the same speed, and once it arrives at the end of the path, it slows down until it gets to the end. Smooth departure is it speeds up from 0 to 60, going slowly faster and faster along the path until it gets to the normal speed you set up here. Smooth is both at the beginning and at the end. It'll have smooth arrival and smooth departure. Elastic, think of it like a rubber band. So you'll shoot out the item from the path. It's going to move super fast, and then when it gets to the very end, then it like bobbles back and forth like an elastic band. And then the last one is fall. This path is, as an item moves along the path, it gets faster and faster and faster, like a falling speed. And that is all you need to know about the path itself. Okay, so let's start doing things with the path. So the first thing I'm going to do is a camera along the path. And I actually took this from, there's another guy who does tutorials on YouTube who some of you probably have seen. His channel is just Project Spark Tutorials, and they're really awesome. He is actually the one who taught me about paths. So I do a very similar method to him with whenever I want to do camera paths, where in order to have the best flexibility with a camera, set two different paths. You set one path for the camera itself. Oh wait, that's a logic cube. I don't want that. You set two paths for the camera, one for the camera itself, and then one for the object the camera is tracking. That way you have freedom of movement of where the camera's going, and you have freedom of movement of where the camera should be looking. So this can be very, very effective. And so what I do is I bring two paths in here, and this thing's not turning for me. Sometimes I have found that probably just like a small little glitch where every once in a while the rotate button isn't quite working. So anyways, what I do is for the actual camera, I use the camera gizmo just because you can see where the front of it is pointing. So I'm going to place this down here, and of course that is not going to rotate, because that would be too easy. Okay, so just pretend that I rotated this sideways because the rotation button really isn't working right now. So just pretend I have this camera pointed that way. Because what I'm going to set is the camera path moving back this way, and then what it's looking at is moving along this path right here. So then for the item moving along the path it's looking at, I just bring in a logic cube and just make it small. Let's bring it down to about 30%. 28, that's close enough. Okay, let's bring this to the beginning of the path. So then, all right, let's see if this works now. Nope, not quite. Okay, so here's how you set up something moving along the path. So this is a blank area. So what I'm going to do is first with a camera, you want to set it to, after a certain thing happens, it powers on. So the first thing I want to do is power this thing off. So let's go into power off. Let's set this to once. And then when, let's say, the player is hit by an attack, then this thing's going to power on. So this is just, I'm setting, so once something in the world happens, this powers on. And that way, you know, it's not going to start immediately. So one of the first few things you want to do when you're doing a path is you want to disable the player brain so that they're not competing. So disable brain, player, and then I'm going to have, so we're going to have this guy move on a path, and we're going to use the in-world picker to find this path right here, confirm selection. And an important thing to do is make sure you have with flying set. That way, if you have your path going up and down in 3D space, the item will move up and down. Otherwise, depending on what the properties of the item are set as, it won't move vertically at all. So just make sure it's set with flying. And then if you want to, you can also set what speed it goes at, or you can just have it go at the default speed that you set that you set in the path. And then we are also going to set within this guy having the logic cube starting. So let's do the in-world picker. Here is the small little logic cube, confirm selection. So when the logic cube, that moves, oops, then it's going to move on its own little path. And click on the logic cube for that path itself. Make sure we set with flying. And now one thing I want to set up here also at the beginning is the camera controls. So we got camera, first person camera, without controls. Wait a minute. Nope, wait. Let's go back. I want to do follow camera. Okay, yep, we do follow camera, following this little guy. Okay, so just with those few lines of code, we now have, once this powers on, it disables the player brain, then it moves along one path, the thing it's following moves along one path, and then we can set, then we can actually set like messages to appear. So you do like duration time, like, oops, 17. Then you would display some sort of text on there, whatever you want the text to be. And that's just the beginning of it. You can do a lot more stuff with this path, but at least we have the path set up to look at the logic cube that controls, and this moves along a path, and then that logic cube moves along a path as well. And just to show you what that would look like, so one camera that I set up at the very beginning of my path, or the beginning of my game, does something very similar to that. Still a work in progress, but basically once something happens, I have my logic cube right here is the camera, so it moves upwards, and then it's following along a camera that's moving along here. So let's quickly test that so I can show you what that looks like. Okay, so we're going to punch this guy. And then, so we have the camera looks like it's on a rig right now because it's moving upwards. And then what it's doing is it's following another logic cube on a path. So that way I can make it look like it's looking at certain things. Like for instance, it's looking over there saying, hey, you can get a sword over there. And then it moves along the path and it looks over there. And it says, hey, you can get a shield over there. And then it moves back to the center and it gives you some more explanation saying your zombies are going to heal you if they attack someone, but if you die, you're dead for good. Okay, so let's go back to edit. So that is cameras on a path. Okay, now that we've done cameras, let's do people on a path. So we're going to go back to that same path that I was working on before. Right back here. Okay, we're going to move this. Now, people on a path is actually even easier. So I did the hard one first. Now we're going to do an easier one. Let's remove this. Oops, I do not want to look at tags. Okay, so let's find, let's use this night. By the way, I got the night pack, whatever, I think it's called the training camp pack. It's pretty cool. It has some really good assemblies that I would highly recommend getting it. Actually, if you want to make a boat, then that one has some good banners that actually act very well as sails. Wow, it's still not letting me. There we go. Okay, finally I can rotate this guy. Okay, so let's go into his brain. It's going to have his default brain set up where he's moving along a path, doing all these things. Okay, let's just remove this entire page. Okay, now let's set it so that he just continually walks along the path. So we do move. Same thing we do with the camera. We do move along path. Use the in-world picker for the path itself. We got that. Then let's set, we don't want him to do flying because we want him to stay on the ground. But let's set the at speed so we can set how fast he's walking at. Let's do it, about 0.25 is a good walking speed, I found. So do that. And let's make sure within the properties we have the path set to ping pong so that he can walk back and forth along the path. And it's also set at 3D so that he can move normally across the path as well. And now the important part is, say you want a few guys to walk along this path. So I've been playing around a lot with different paths. Like for instance, we got a path right here where it moves along the courtyard kind of from here all the way down. And I have like 8 different guys along this path. So what I originally did is I had each one of these 8 guys, let's just go into them. Each one of these 8 guys moves along this path at speed 0.15. That's even slower walking speed, but they're all moving along the same path. And in theory, it should work, but it just gets really messy because what happens is, especially if you're doing ping pong, these guys end up clumping up together. When they get to the very end of a path, then they all want to move, turn around and move along the same path again. So a lot of times you'll get them bumping up against each other, and it ends up kind of glitching out, and they just all get stuck in place. So honestly, if you want to have 2 guards moving along the same path, I know it's a bit of extra work, but you really should make 2 separate paths that go alongside of each other. This just allows you to really in detail decide how they're moving. So let's just mirror this path that I had. We got 1 point right here, and then we got the next point right here. Okay, so that's good. So then let's just copy this guy and put him along here. And then all we have to do is get into the copied guy's brain and just change the in-world picker to this path. And there you go. They're both going to say path, but they're both different paths. And so like that, we now have 2 guys walking along a path. Again, do not have them walking along the same path. I'll just so that you guys see like really how much I tried to have 2 people walking along a path. So I have 2 guys here, which I haven't fixed them yet because I wanted to show it to you, where I had them walking along the same path. And what I did is I set one of them, which makes sense, to move along the path, but its Z position is equal to the other guy's Z position plus 1. So what that would mean is that his position is 1 tile away from the other guy's position as they're walking along the path. And that glitched out also. That this guy continued to just randomly rotate around. I mean, it looked like a complete glitch. So even if you try and do positioning, that seems to glitch out. That could just be a bug that they might fix. So maybe by the time this game comes out, you can do that solution where you're setting their positions to be slightly different than each other. But at the time of Project Spark Beta, that is not the case. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to talk about is how to make different objects do a certain thing once they've completed a path. So I'm going to illustrate this by talking about a certain thing that I have in my game. So really, I'm still doing a lot of world building in my game, but I love the idea of having this like underground little village area. And by the way, for those of you who haven't seen any of my past videos, this game is called Zombie Punch 2. It's just kind of a follow-up to my other one where, again, I'm still just testing around with all the different concepts, but the general premise of the game is I am a zombie overlord, and it is my task to turn everyone else on the map into a zombie. So I thought it'd be really cool to have this underground area where I can walk into it, and then these people who are all talking around this campfire, I can turn them all into zombies. And I even have a little kid kind of up here on the end looking at the fish pool. So I thought that was super cool, but the only problem was when I turned all these guys into zombies, I set in my zombie brains that they would walk towards the closest human, And so because it's underground, what happened is they all just walked towards this wall and just kept on bumping up against it. And so what I had to do is I had to set a path within here, and I had to have them walk out of this cavern along this path. So they walk along here, along this path, and then once they're out, then they can roam the free world like all the other zombies can. So in order to do this, I had to have things move along a path, and once they were done moving along a path, then they do other things. So I'm going to illustrate this with, for those of you who watch my tutorial on zombie brains, you'll understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I have these guys, they all turn into zombies, and I saved my little zombies underground here so that, because I'm using this in-world picker tool where their brains pick from these zombie brains, so I had to set them somewhere. Anyways, watch my last zombie brain video if you're confused about this. We won't worry about this during the pathing tool. But anyways, this zombie right here is one of the zombies that is underneath that cavern. So once a person underneath the cavern dies, it brings this zombie in, and so that's why I'm over here doing this. But anyways, what I set was, so I first set with when enemies are closer than 12 tiles, they move towards enemies, and then they attack enemies. If they're not closer than 12 tiles, then this guy moves along this path. I use the in-world picker tool for the path at the speed 0.2. So line number 11 for you guys should be familiar because we've done that before. Then you add this item. So you do, I'm just going to re-add it so that you guys can see where to find all of this. So what I did is when, after, now, let me remember, I think it's under movement events. Oh, score. I was right my first guess. Okay, so it's under movement events, when after path complete. You want to do a switch to next page. So let's go to brains. Let's go to pages, switch page. Then you can either you can set a number page, or you can set next page. So let's do that. Just depending on, if you have like 10 pages, maybe this is on page number 9. So next page. So let's just remove this because they're duplicates. And then I set all of the rest of its actions. So these are the normal zombie actions. Again, for those of you who want a description of all of these lines of code, look at my past video about zombie brains. But yeah, that is basically all you need to do to set it so that it does something after a path. Now, you could also technically do page number 2 could be moving along a new path. And once they move along that new path, then they switch to another page and do another thing. And so you can really set up something to move along as many paths as you want them to. Say you have this intricate, map of 20 different paths. You could set 20 different pages so that once it finishes one path, it moves along to another path. And I don't know, some things you could do some cool things with that. So that is that's what you can do with that. So anyways, that is paths in a nutshell. They are one of the coolest tools in Project Spark because of the amount of things that you can do with paths. And really, this is just scratching the surface of paths. You can think about, a path is just a scripted area where anything can move along it. So you can even have your player move along a path at a certain time. You can have different events happen along paths. Really, the path is how you have any pre-scripted thing happen that happens as you intend it to. So that's going to do it for this time. Thanks for watching and listening through this whole tutorial. If you have other thoughts or ideas on paths, feel free to post them below. And also, if you guys have any requests for future tutorials, let me know, and I will try and take care of them in the future. All right, thanks, guys.